Friday, of course, Brian Molefe's imminent return to the national power supplier Eskom following a board decision. Initial reaction was a flood of condemnation from political parties, moral and procedural points of view. But yesterday, the Black First Land First movement of Andile Mngxitama came out in support of Molefe's return to the power utility. So we look at what are the rules governing pension funds and how could an 18-month stint as a chief executive officer lead to a 30 million payout. And we look at the legality of this matter, of course, with Rosemary Hunter, who is a pension funds lawyer and a former deputy registrar of pension funds. Rosemary, good morning to you and thank you so much for coming through.
Good morning.
Thank you. Now, let us just first look at this issue before we dwell into the Molefe's issue. Are pension payouts, the rules in general, are they applicable generally so, or are they standard, or are they predetermined from one individual to another?
Look, each pension fund has its own rules,
okay.
But the rules would not be specific to an individual. They would have different categories of members or different provisions that apply if you resign, if you take early retirement, if you die, or if you go on ordinary retirement. But provided that one of those circumstances applies to you, then that rule will apply to you. It's not, this is the Brian Molefe rule, and that's the Rosemary Hunter rule. But the rules are binding on the individual, and they're binding on the participating employer, and particularly insofar as its contributions and what it has to pay in and so on. Yeah. So you can't just go and change them willy-nilly.
Yeah. But then, what would the merits be in such a payout, especially in Molefe's case?
I must be honest, I'm puzzled. I've actually got the rules of the Eskom pension fund off the internet, and I assume that that's the fund he belongs to. And if that is the fund he belongs to, well, if he indeed resigned, which we all thought at the time the announcement was made, because he said he was leaving voluntary in the interest of governance, then he's really only entitled to a payout of the money that he's contributed, the employer has contributed, share, the return on the investments and less expenses.
Which would not be too much.
Nothing like that.
Nothing close to 30 million.
No. So then I was thinking, well, maybe there is a provision that if the organisation is being reorganised and you're effectively retrenched, if they want you to leave for the grounds of efficiency, then you get a better benefits of sort of 3 times your contributions and so on. But the wording of that rule doesn't fit here, because he said he left in the interests of good governance. His position wasn't closed. They weren't restructuring the organisation. He was leaving because there were these allegations about him. So that, for me, it doesn't seem that can apply. And then there's a question of early retirement. The latest statements seem to say he asked for early retirement. Yeah. But from my quick research last night, I don't think he was 55 years old. It sounds like he was 50 when he left. And the early retirement rules only apply to people who are 55 or above. So
what do we call this? Golden handshake, maybe?
Well, it may be that they're calling it retirement or something, but I don't see how it can go through the pension fund rules. They may be calling it something else, but I don't see how it can work through the Eskom pension fund. Assuming that's the fund he belonged to, and I haven't missed something in the rules. But it just doesn't make sense to me, because as I understand it, as I say, I think he was around 50. And so those early retirement extra benefits would not be
applicable. Yeah, but what is the role of pension fund trustees, especially versus boards, in approving such deals?
Well, only if there are special circumstances. Some of these rules say if the board agrees. I don't think any of these did, but I can't remember. But ordinarily, there isn't decision making. Those rules are the ones that apply. Yeah. Occasionally, they say if some rules will give the board of trustees a decision-making power, but the Eskom Pension Fund Board of Trustees is a very big board. They've got union people elected by the union members and non-union members, and there's pensioners and so on. You can't just make a sudden decision. Calling a board meeting is a big deal. So I don't know if that happened. I don't have personal knowledge, but I think it's highly unlikely.
But seeing that he could not have contributed, of course, this 30 million rand towards his pension fund, where was the money going to come from? Was the balance going to be paid perhaps by the members of the fund themselves?
No. In situations where the rules say that there can be an enhanced benefit, certainly in this fund, the employer has to pay it in, because otherwise the fund is going to be financially unsound. But I didn't see a rule that applies that would say that the employer would have to pay it in here. So, as I say, I just don't see how this works if it's straight out of the pension fund. If it was through another pension fund, like a personal retirement annuity or something, but even then he couldn't have got more than 1/3 out. if he had in fact gone on early retirement. So, and that's what they say the 7 million was about. But yeah, to be honest, it's really hard for me to see how that worked.
Yeah.
Which then comes to the question as, why did the board fault? You know, was he threatening litigation? I'd love to see the basis on which he could enforce some such an agreement, because I can't make head or tail of how it could have been legal, certainly from what I can see here.
Yeah, but now, Rosemary, you know that the pension fund has now been swapped for reinstatement. Is it legal?
Reinstatement. Well, as I say, then there's 30 million, it would fall away. He would then become back as an employee. That's fine. It sounds to me from these news reports that they're treating him as if he's never left, even while he was still an MP. But then there's no 30 million. But I don't know, what I'm trying to understand is how you can say, I'm resigning voluntarily, but since you didn't give me this deal, which maybe they came to the conclusion it couldn't be done legally, then you have to reinstate me, because that's inconsistent with the statement that he left voluntarily. He could only enforce a big payout if you were going against your will and you said, all right, pay me a golden handshake and I'll go.
Yeah.
But that's not, even the latest statements say, now he asked for early retirement. It didn't say we as a board said for the good of good governance and so on.
He should step down.
They keep putting it at him. And so I don't understand what there was to enforce.
So what do you think will happen going forward? Is there a sense in the pension fund space that there's a need perhaps for a review of pension fund laws, especially if we look at this case specifically?
No, I don't think this case has exposed anything problematic about the law. These are normal rules. The pension fund, the rules of this fund are not that unusual. It's one of these big old defined benefit funds, but most of the funds are defined contributions these days. But it's just a question of whether the rules have been interpreted properly here. As I say, I'm struggling to figure out how this works.
Well, we're going to have to leave it at that, Rosemary, but thank you so much for coming through.
Right, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much indeed. Rosemary Hunter there talking to us about the pension fund rules and legality of Eskom rehiring Brian Molefe. Of course, the latest we have on this multi-stakeholder story is the Congress of the People's threat, of course, to block the entrance of Megawatt Park and to deny Molefe entry. We're also awaiting the outcomes of a reported meeting yesterday between the ANC and the Public Enterprise Minister, Lynn Brown. It is a developing story that will be touching base with here on Morning Live. Well, let's take a break.